The candle trembled when the air conditioner breathed. Eva leaned toward it, lungs paused between wanting and refusal when a girl's voice broke the hush like a bell. "Can we join you?" A man set down 2 paper plates beside her cake as if he'd been expected all along. The candle wobbled, recovered. The girl pulled out a chair with both hands, climbed up, and smiled at Eva as if they were already friends. Eva blinked. In the Lancaster Grand Hotel's private ballroom, an acre of marble and chandeliers and a string quartet playing to one set of ears. No one had asked her anything that simple all night. "Please," she said, because her mother had taught her to respond before the dread could. The word tumbled out, too soft and too honest, stinging as it landed in the glittering emptiness of her 22nd birthday. The hotel staff had prepared for an army. Her father's people had decked the ballroom in orchids and blue glass. A cake sat on a round table all by itself with one tiny candle planted stubbornly in its center, the smallest flame in a room built to be bright. The Lancaster logo gleamed on the far wall like a benevolent god. But tonight the only movement was the candle, the lift and fall of Eva's chest beneath a pale dress, the tiny swishing of the girl's locket against her collarbone as she leaned in. "I'm Lily," the girl said. 8, maybe 9, hair like a dark watercolor in the ballroom light. "Happy birthday." "Eva," she said, and the syllable felt like waking. She nodded to the man, who had stayed standing a little apart in the way men who carry grief sometimes do. His hands were clean, but his nails bore the crescent scars of someone who wrestled wood for a living. "You brought plates." His mouth tipped up. "I'm Daniel. The bakery table's out of plates unless you're a donor with a gold badge, and I'm not that. We improvised." He glanced at the single candle. "You should blow it out." Eva tried. She drew air in the way they taught in therapy, expand the ribs, don't fight what won't obey. Her lips shaped the O of the wish. The breath came, the breath snagged. She swallowed humiliation and tasted wax. "I can help," Lily said, already on her feet, cheeks puffed with cheerful purpose. "Wait." Eva laughed, surprised at herself and at how the sound lifted some stubborn dark in the room. "Big wishes don't like partners." "Little wishes do," Lily said. "Little ones are easy to share." Then, the word sat on her tongue while something in her chest loosened. "Okay, little wish." They leaned in together. The candle went out in one gentle exhale, a tiny thread of smoke unwinding itself toward the chandeliers. Something in the room softened, not the lights or the money, those stayed sharp. Something inside Eva that had been knotted so long she'd forgotten the shape of it. "Now cake," Lily declared, practical. She reached for the knife poised in the stand. Eva tried to catch it with a hand that did not trust itself. The knife slipped against porcelain. Embarrassment flooded Eva, a tide she tried to dam with humor. "Turns out wishes don't cut cake." Daniel's hands came into her view and then stopped, hovering. He was careful, so careful it made her throat ache. "May I?" "Please," she said, another too honest word. But instead of cutting for her, he picked up a napkin ring and the linen tie that held a rolled cloth. He threaded the tie through the ring, looped it around the knife handle, and tightened it in a way that made improvised sense in an instant. "Grip the ring, not the handle," he said, angling the blade so she could see the geometry. "You get leverage without fighting the wrist." He placed it so lightly in her palm that she didn't startle. She closed her fingers around the ring. Her hand trembled, the blade stayed true. She pressed. The cake gave with a clean sigh. Part of her, the part that used to engineer piano scales into muscle memory, thrilled at the problem solved with kindness. "How did you?" she began. "I make things for hands," he said, quiet. "Sometimes the hands belong to people who think they don't deserve to touch." He nodded to the cake. "First slice is yours." Lily, who would later turn out to be the firmest authority on firsts and seconds, nodded sagely. "Birthday person always gets the first piece," she said. "That's law." Eva slid a wedge of vanilla against the plate with a steadiness that surprised her. "You're very qualified to enforce statutes." "I've been 8 for a long time," Lily said. She tapped the locket at her throat, silver, oval, engraved with a cornflower so delicate it looked like breath. The locket spun and settled with a soft click. "Also, I watch people when they think no one's watching." "That sounds like a superpower and a warning," Daniel murmured. Lily grinned at him, then softened back to Eva. "My mom used to say wishes are practice for bravery." What did you wish? Lily, Daniel said, a warning threaded with affection. We don't ask people to say wishes out loud. That's a sacred rule next to the cake one. Right. Lily swallowed a bite of cake, then whispered behind her palm to Eva as if she could tuck the whisper into Eva's pocket, private safe. You don't have to tell me, but I hope it's for something you can reach. Eva couldn't look directly at the hope in those eyes without flinching. She nodded instead, the movement small and contained, the way most movements were now. I think it is. They ate cake like a tiny committee of conspirators. Lily asked about Eva's chair with an earnest curiosity that never once felt like a spotlight. Does it go on grass? Sometimes, but then it sulks, Eva answered, and Lily, serious, said they should petition for chair-friendly parks. Daniel told her he'd petition anyone for anything if she wrote it in crayon. When Eva's hand tired, Lily simply offered hers, stabilizing the plate without fanfare. No pity. 2 humans and a plate. It was the kindness she had forgotten existed outside scripted visits and careful pity. She could have cried, but she didn't dare waste the intimacy on tears. From across the ballroom came murmurs, the sound of polite money arriving in clumps, late, humming with self-importance. Eva's body recognized the ripple before her mind did, the tempo of security in motion, the pitch of staff recalibrating. She didn't need to look to know her father had stepped into the room. Richard Lancaster wore power like a second skin. He paused in the entry to accept a greeting from the deputy mayor and dispense one-liners to donors whose names he could recall in sleep. He owned charm like he owned equity, as tools. He spotted his daughter. For a fraction of a second, something unguarded crossed his face. Relief, maybe, or the inventory of a father who counts breaths. Then he saw the man and the child. He came to their table at a leisurely pace that was a speech in itself, the kind that made people around him arrange their spines to be equal parts ready and grateful. "Sweetheart," he said, bending to kiss Eva's temple. His cologne was expensive and almost reasonable, which meant it had cost him something to choose it. "I'm sorry I'm late. Board called a vote that couldn't wait." The pause was for show. No one called votes that didn't wait for Richard. He straightened and turned the full wattage of his attention to Daniel and Lily. He smiled. Richard's smiles were beautiful. They were also audits. "And you are?" "Daniel," the man said. He didn't stand, he didn't offer to shake. His hands were visible, open on the table. He had taken the measure of the room the moment he walked in. Eva realized, the sort of man who knew where exits were and when to use them. "This is my daughter, Lily. We were admiring your baker's work." "Mr. Morris," he said. "We didn't RSVP." "Obviously." Richard was too trained to glance at their clothes as he said it, but his eyes flicked anyway, quick, precise. He flagged a passing server with one finger. "Miguel, would you arrange a donation to the community arts program in Mr. Morris's name, and have someone escort Mr. Morris and his daughter to the family function on the 9th floor? They'll be more comfortable there." Lily shifted, the kind of small movement a child makes when she knows she's being moved like a chess piece. She looked at Eva. Something very old in the room shivered. "We're comfortable here," Daniel said, not unkindly. "Thank you for the offer." "It wasn't an offer," Richard said softly, the charm dimming to efficiency. "My daughter's privacy matters." "She's right here," Lily said, "because 8-year-olds don't litigate power, they puncture it. You can ask her if we're bothering." Richard's gaze cut back to Eva. He took her hand as if she were a ledger he meant to balance with touch alone. "Do you want them here?" Eva thought of the candle, the knife, the laugh that had startled out of her earlier like the first shift of ice on a winter river. She also thought of the old habit that lived in her fingers, answer in a way that smooths your father's day. She felt that habit flex, and she set her jaw against it. "Yes," she said. "I do." Daniel's head turned slightly, an increment. He had not expected her to wrestle the room in front of its master. "Cyrus?" "No, Richard. She'd been at a piano with a teacher once whose name had become a stand-in for every authority." She shoved the habit away again. Richard's smile didn't flicker. He stroked the back of her hand with his thumb in a gesture he thought read as tender and only ever landed as surveillance. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and turned to the server. "Cancel that." As he left, he laid a light touch on his security chief's elbow, a signal buried in mannerism. The security chief, whose name Eva never learned because security did not have names any more than fixtures did, angled his chin toward the man and the child. His posture translated, note them. "Your father is made of glass," Lily said when he was out of earshot. Daniel choked on his water. "What?" "He looks see-through and shiny," Lily said, serious. "Like if you touch the wrong part, you'll leave a print that never goes away." Eva looked down at her hands. Her nails were short now because long nails caught on spokes and upholstery. Her fingers carried calluses where the chair's rims met skin. She put her hand over Lily's where it rested on the table. "You're very good at metaphors." "I had a teacher who said that. She also said I talked too much in class, but she was smiling when she said it, so I think she meant the opposite." "I'd love to meet her," Eva said and meant it. 2 songs later, Daniel checked his watch. Something in him had relaxed, but another thing had not. "We should go before we turn into pumpkins. Lily has school, and I have a plank pretending to be a table." "It's an actual table," Lily told Eva, conspiratorial. "But he won't stop petting it until it tells him what it wants to be when it grows up." "Occupational hazard," he said. He turned to Eva. "Would it be all right if it might be presumptuous to ask?" He scratched the back of his neck, suddenly shy in a way that made him look younger and not at all less dignified. "We could trade book recommendations. I'm a mediocre reader who wants to be better." Eva, who hadn't been asked for a recommendation that wasn't about a charity since before the accident, smiled. "Start with something you think you'll hate. The betrayal will convert you. Do you like music?" "I like wood," he said, "but I think I could like music if you gave me a map." "Deal," she said. She unlocked her phone. Her father pretended not to notice. She typed her number and slid the screen across the table. Lily's hand hovered over it like a priestess over an altar. "Now you can text us when you're bored," Lily said. "But not when we're sleeping. We have to sleep to be smart. That's science." "I'll never risk science," Eva said solemnly. Lily pulled the paper crown from the centerpiece, a silly thing made of heavy white card and foil, and placed it on Eva's hair. The crown slipped, lopsided. Lily adjusted it with 2 fingers and a small frown that said she had been entrusted with delicate instruments. "There," she said, satisfied. "Now you look like someone who owns a ballroom." "What if she already does?" Daniel murmured. "I hope she owns a better one," Lily answered. Daniel walked them to the elevators. He didn't push her chair. He walked alongside and matched her pace so precisely it felt like choreography. Inside the elevator, their reflections multiplied in the mirrors. A man who had learned where to put his grief. A girl who carried a locket like armor. A woman in a chair with a crooked crown. When the doors started to close, Lily shot forward and hugged Eva without asking, then stepped back with the grace of someone who knew where boundaries lived and also when to cross them. "Happy birthday," she said again, softer. "Don't let anyone blow out your wishes for you." The doors slid shut on Eva's startled, unsteady smile. In her suite, the candle on the small cake, she had insisted on bringing it upstairs like a salvage, was still burning. A bit of wax collapsed at its base like a sigh. The flame guttered in the draft and held. Eva watched it from the doorway. She sat for a long time with her hands on the wheels, fingertips resting on the rubber, feeling the smallest vibration from the building's breaths. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Daniel. Thank you for sharing your cake with us. Lily says to tell you she named the candle Bob." I argued for candle. "She won." Another text, seconds later. "Are you more of a Bach or a Bowie person?" Her thumbs hesitated over the glass, then flew. "Both. Also birdsong and bad pop and the sound of a sanding block on maple." She hit send and flinched at her own recklessness, as if she'd leaned too far and tipped toward the floor. Her father's voice from a distant age whispered, "Audit your impulses." She put the phone face down on the table as if covering a mirror. It buzzed again. "Maple has opinions. Good to know." She laughed, alone with the candle that refused the system's air, then blew it out, not to end anything, but because she wanted the smoke and the clean slate of dark. Daniel's world smelled faintly of lemon oil and sawdust, of hands that had washed and walls that remembered what they'd been. His shop was a narrow ground floor room in a brick building that had once housed a cobbler. Planes and chisels hung on a pegboard like a liturgy. A tiny, 4-legged stool waited in a corner with a painted star Lily had insisted on adding. "So you can find it when the sky goes out." she had explained, and he had nodded and ached and added 2 more stars, because once you let grief in, it wanted to decorate. On his workbench, clamps closed like gentle jaws around a breadboard edge. A photo of Rachel, his wife, leaned against a jar of screws. Her smile sat like an answer in the shop even when there was no question. He didn't talk to her picture the way people in movies did. He sent her updates in the language of wood. Is this what you meant when you said, "Don't rush, let it tell you"? Keys turned in his lock. Marla, the neighbor whose plants he watered and whose life he patched with small kindnesses, peered around the doorframe. "You left your door cracked," she said. "So obviously I assumed you were dead and came to pillage your chisels." "MMM," he said, not looking up. "You're smiling," she said suspiciously. "You're not allowed to smile in January. The city hasn't thawed you yet." "Just, something good happened," he said. He allowed the grin to stay just a fraction so she wouldn't think he was unwell. "We met someone." "We?" Marla looked for Lily the way people look for a heart. "Where is she?" "Out glittering the magnets on her school locker. This someone was we were at a hotel." He winced. "A big one, the Lancaster." Marla made a face. "Tell me you didn't sell your soul for free canapes." "She did," he said before he stopped himself, language betraying proximity he wasn't sure he had a right to. "Eva, she was alone at her own party. We joined." Marla leaned into the workbench. Her nails were always immaculate, painted colors that sounded like expensive cocktails. She tapped the photo frame once like a punctuation mark and then left it alone. "You're allowed to find a new story," she said, "even if the first chapters were written in grief." "I'm not sure I know how," he said. "Good," she said. "The stories worth telling don't let you write the outline. Where's the girl?" He told her about the candle and the knife, about the way Eva's face had changed when her hand found purchase on the improvised grip. He didn't tell her how his palms had sweat when he realized Richard Lancaster, the man who had signed his termination letter, stood 3 feet away measuring his shoes. He kept that part the way you keep a splinter, small and irritating and dangerous if left in too long. After Marla left with a loaf of bread he hadn't meant to give her, and a lecture on varnish he hadn't meant to deliver, Daniel opened the drawer with the state safety board letters. He touched the edges like he was reminding himself that paper exists in 2 worlds, the one where it can change laws and the one where it can be burned. He closed the drawer very carefully. The next day, the pool at the rehab center smelled like chlorine and determination. Eva's therapist, Amala, had the serene patience of someone who could outstare pain until it flinched. "Again," Amala said for the 3rd time, which meant, "I know you hate me now, you'll thank me later." "I'm not thanking you today," Eva said, breathless and furious and newly addicted to the word again. "Good," Amala said. "Save it for the end of the week." Eva did the exercises. She did them until sweat slicked her hairline and her arms trembled and the anger inside her turned into a kind of clean fire. Afterward, she traded bad puns with Daniel via text while a teenager in a fleece blanket wheeled by and grinned like he knew exactly what was on her screen. "Name 3 books you think you'll hate," she typed with fingers that refused to be soft only for injury. He replied instantly, "The ones that tell me how to forgive myself in 7 steps. She snorted, "Try fiction." Less lying. That night in a glass box on the 73rd floor, Richard looked at the printout of Eva's phone logs the way a ship captain scans a horizon. It wasn't the content he wanted, it was the pattern. Caldwell, the CFO who'd taught an entire generation of young executives that numbers were knives, stood at the window with his hands clasped behind his back. "Morris," Richard said, naming the man like a problem to solve. "Find him." Caldwell tapped a keyboard with 2 fingers, the way men do when they believe reality was designed to fit their hands. "Furniture maker? Widow?" "Widower," Richard corrected automatically because control had grooves and he slid into them even when it wasn't necessary. "Widower, 1 daughter. He used to be, oh." Caldwell's brows moved a fraction of an inch. It was practically a gasp. "He was an engineer, safety protocols, contracted for us briefly. He filed things. No, attempted. He left." "Which means he might hate me," Richard said almost lightly as if the possibility didn't land anywhere near his heart. "Get me the details, quietly." "Always," Caldwell said. Always here meant silently, which meant ruthlessly. He stepped out to make calls with a voice that could settle into any register required, grandfatherly, collegiate, threatening. He always sounded like money counting itself. Richard stayed. He looked at the photo on his desk of Eva at 6, grinning with frosting on her nose while her mother laughed beside her. He set the frame face down and told himself it was to prevent glare. He rubbed his temple with forefinger and thumb until a headache edged away. The city outside glittered like a rodent horde, diamonds that were just broken bottles caught in streetlight. Love is leverage, he had told himself for years. Love is a tool to keep the people you care about from walking into traffic. He had not examined how often he had used the tool to build cages. He got his answer about Daniel in less than a day. It felt like time obeyed his will even when the universe refused. Eva didn't want the waterfront to become a symbol, but it did anyway. Seagulls shrieked like gossip. The boardwalk creaked under joggers. Daniel came with 2 coffees, one nested in a plastic handle that swiveled like a miracle of cheap engineering. "I made modifications," he said, holding it out. She slotted her hand through the handle and froze, wanting to memorize the way it fit. Her fingers tightened. The cup didn't tilt. It should not have made her want to cry. "Thank you," she said instead, the words both too small and heavy. "I don't know the right way to do this," Daniel said. "All the good things in my life have come from strangers choosing each other. And sometimes the worst things have, too." "Same," she said, because she was done pretending she lived in a different novel. They talked about wood and music after that, because hearts can only hold so much at once, and this was supposed to be small, early, unclenched. He told her he loved to leave tool marks in places only a hand would feel them. A secret honesty. She told him she missed the weight of a Steinway's keys, even though piano had always been both refuge and battleground. He told her Lily slept with her locket clutched in one small fist the way other children clutched stuffed animals. She told him the first time she fell from her chair in the kitchen she had laughed so hard she scared herself because something in her had been waiting to fall for years and was relieved to stop bracing. He said, "I used to be an engineer. Then I wasn't." "What happened?" she asked, and then wished she hadn't because she saw the way his mouth tightened in a reflex that had no words attached to it yet. "I left," he said. "It didn't fit, the compromises. I thought I could do more good with my hands." He held up his palms like proof. She had never seen hands that looked more like a promise and less like a threat. She let him keep his silence the way you let someone keep a photograph, with respect and the knowledge that it would come out when it was time. Elliot found her at a gallery where the idea of art had become a commodity for people who talked about ideas like sports. He was wearing the same cologne he used to, the same grin that belonged in photographs because it always felt posed. He had left after her accident with a note that said, "I can't do this," as if love were a trend he'd been duped into investing in. He had closed the door so gently the silence thundered for months. "Eva," he said, as if he had rights to the syllables. He smelled like restraint and expensive grief. He held out a vinyl record and the past with it. "Your favorite." She took the sleeve, fingers brushing cardboard worn smooth by someone else's hands. It was the album she had played the summer before the crash when her life was still organized around 32 measures and applause. She had believed in arcs then, in stories that rose and fell on cue. "You remembered," she said. She couldn't tell if the gratitude that rose in her throat belonged to that girl or this woman. "I'm sorry," he said, each consonant polished. "I was a coward. If you'll let me make amends, there's a way you can frame your foundation's work to avoid what happened to us. To you, I have contacts. We can turn what you've endured into leadership. It would be good for you." "For your father, for your firm?" she asked. He didn't flinch. "Everyone benefits when narratives." "I'm not a narrative," she said, then softened because cutting people to the quick had never been her sport, though she was learning it from a city that practiced every day. "Thank you for the record, Elliot. Let's let the apology be enough for now." He leaned in, lips aiming for a kiss that was mostly a proposition. She shifted. He kissed air. As she wheeled away, Elliot's phone buzzed. He lowered his gaze, thumb flicking over the glass. Caldwell's name lit his screen like a spotlight. Keep her close. We can't afford sentiment. Daniel had never been summoned like a servant until the day he was. The email came on plain letterhead. the language calibrated to seem optional. He put on his one good shirt and went to the tower anyway because there were animals you did not turn your back on, and he suspected Richard was one of them. The conference room was all glass and steel and view. Richard stood with his back to the city as if to demonstrate ownership. A legal pad lay on the table to make the meeting feel human. "I appreciate you coming," Richard said, which meant, "I appreciate you making me feel magnanimous." "I didn't say I'd stay," Daniel said. Richard's mouth quirked. He liked people with spines. He had systems to remove them. He talked about scholarships for Lily, a new house capital for Daniel's business. He used words like future and stability as if they were currency he could mint at will. "Why?" Daniel asked at last. "I want what's best for my daughter," Richard said. "You are not that." "Because I'm not wealthy?" "Because you're a variable," Richard said, which was worse. "I was taught," Daniel said, and didn't say by whom, "that family is a variable. You hold it, not solve it." He stood. "Keep your money. Use it to pay the people who keep your cars from killing anyone else." Richard's gaze sharpened. "Do you think love can protect you from due diligence?" he asked, soft as a blade concealed in a bouquet. "No," Daniel said. "I think integrity can." "The tabloids enjoy men like you," Richard said. "They'll make you famous for 3 days and then set fire to your shop as they move on to the next feast." "Then I'll build again," Daniel said, because wood can be charred and still hold shape. He left without taking the elevator Richard would have preferred. Eva invited them to the gala because she felt stubborn and because she wanted to call the rooms bluff. The event raised money for adaptive design, and she had fought to include makers who solved problems without 37 meetings and a patent lawyer. The invitation to Daniel and Lily was a flare shot quietly into the night. Lily wore a dress the color of confidence and sneakers with a small blue flower she'd drawn on the heel. Daniel wore the suit that had gone to 2 weddings and a funeral before it came here. Eva's wheels were adorned with mother-of-pearl inlays, tiny luminous scales that caught light and returned it in shards. Eva's speech made the air hush differently than it had for the men who spoke before her. She didn't perform gratitude for the thin generosity that carved out spaces and then applauded itself for doing so. She talked about the joy of a mug you can hold, a knife you can guide without losing your grip, the way love expresses itself when it's done measuring outcomes. Usefulness is not charity. Usefulness is a form of love. People whose clothes cost more than Daniel's truck shifted on their feet. Some looked chastened. Some pretended to look thoughtful. Some looked at their phones because truth always makes other people's screens extra interesting. Lily beamed like a lighthouse. Daniel felt an ache unfurl inside him he had not made room for, not attraction, though there was that, something like relief that someone had named his private theology out loud. Caldwell orbited like a planet with its own gravitational field, smiles at donors, quiet words for handlers. Elliot hovered at the edge of clusters, shepherding people toward Daniel with compliments that were knives. "You're so authentic. What a story. It's brave for you to show up." Daniel took the hits with the patience of someone who had built tables that could survive toddlers. He drank water with Lily's straw and told a CEO wife that, yes, wood did change with humidity, and so did everything worth saving. Lily wandered, but she never strayed far. When she grew anxious, too many people, too many eyes, her fingers found her locket by muscle memory. She rubbed the engraved cornflower with her thumb until her breathing slowed. Eva saw it, and then saw the tiny initials inside when Lily opened it to show her, a child's small show, and tell to a person she wanted to keep. A.H. Eva read aloud, then stopped because the letters landed in her mind and detonated in a room she had boarded up long ago. The date beneath them matched the night of an old photo in her father's study, Richard and a woman at a gala dressed like secrets. The woman wore a cornflower pendant. The smile on Richard's face was easy in a way she had never seen it later. "Who is A.H.?" she asked, trying to keep her voice a coin that wouldn't clatter on marble. "My mom's mom," Lily said, not yet old enough to understand how shards travel. "She gave it to my mom when she was scared and said cornflowers grow in bad dirt. My mom gave it to me because she said bravery can live inside metal and skin." "That sounds like someone I'd like to meet," Eva said, and for once the wish felt like a thing with a timeline. Richard took the stage for the toast with a glass of champagne and a face that had been trained by experts to look like honesty. "To adaptive design," he said, and people raised glasses. "To a world that makes room for everyone," another lift, and to remembering that wolves sometimes wear borrowed suits. There was polite laughter, the kind that follows a joke people can feel but don't detect. Eva's hand stilled on her wheel. Daniel straightened. The reflected lights printed themselves on the champagne striation like rain. "Not all who arrive with good stories deserve our trust," Richard continued, his voice warm in a way only men who have learned to weaponize warmth can make it. "Some are disaffected, disgruntled, looking for leverage. To them, we offer the same compassion we offer anyone help elsewhere." Gasps didn't move the air in rooms like this. They just added an extra layer of humidity. Eyes pivoted toward Daniel, then away, the way you watch a car accident through your hands. Lily reached for his hand without looking up. He gave it without pretending not to. "Excuse me," Daniel said when the toast bled into forced applause. His voice carried just enough. "We're not used to rooms where kindness is bartered." He smiled, not derisive, not eager to wound. "We make things that don't require a badge to operate." Somebody clapped. It might have been Marla. She'd come because he'd given her a ticket, and she believed rooms improved when she stepped into them. Eva smiled through a static storm that had crawled into her skin. Richard's jaw flexed once and then went still. He lifted his glass again as if the toast were a shield. Lily squeezed Daniel's fingers harder and did not cry. The night spilled itself out like a melodrama. Photos were taken with angles that told stories whether people agreed to them or not. People whispered S-words: sabotage, smear, safety. When Daniel and Lily left, it felt like the room exhaled relief at having been spared a scene. When Eva went home, she scrolled through a feed she should not have opened. "Eva's new man is her father's disgruntled ex-employee." The headline screamed in that font tabloids use when subtlety would only slow the feast. Beneath it, a grainy photo of Daniel's old ID badge, the Lancaster logo blurred but not enough. A cropped email he might have written that read, out of context, like anger built into code. She threw the phone onto the couch in a burst of anger and then picked it up with the caution of someone retrieving a newborn from a precarious bassinet. She called Daniel. He didn't pick up. She imagined he was protecting his daughter from a dozen glowing rectangles. She did not leave a message because she didn't trust what her voice would do. In the morning, she let the anger make decisions for her because letting anger do something useful felt like justice. She went to his shop before the city had fully caffeinated. The bell above the door gave the kindest sound it knew how, a small promise. "Daniel," she called. "I'm here," he said, emerging from behind a stack of boards dressed in sawdust and apology. There were salt tracks under his eyes that had not existed yesterday. "I was going to call. I didn't know what to say." "You told me you were an engineer," she said. She could hear the steadiness in her voice as if it belonged to someone who had practiced calm on a stage. "You didn't tell me you worked for my father." "I didn't," he said. "Not for long. I worked for what I thought the company could be." "And the bag my father is using your headshot for." He flinched. His gaze flicked to the workbench the way a person glances at the exit before a fire. That was when she saw the folder. It lay open beneath a plane and a pencil neat in a carpenter's line. The government letterhead was an understated blue. The words she could see were the words of men who had learned to speak a truth without making anyone in power uncomfortable. She read faster anyway. Date: 8 months before the accident. Subject: concerns re Lancaster Dynamics Autonomous Fleet, early software Model X. Language that had not existed in her heart translated itself in her mind: failure to address redundancy, instrument drift, edge case anomalies. "I wrote those," Daniel said, voice low. "I warned them. They told me to adjust my lens." She pressed the heel of her hand into the wood of the bench until pressure became clarity. "You knew there was a flaw," she said. She couldn't make it a question because if she opened it to yes or no, she thought she might break. 8 months before," the word crashed into itself. "I knew there was a problem," he said. "I didn't know it would be." He stopped and swallowed the word too late. He had almost said you. His eyes were open the way a man's eyes are when he knows that he has stepped into a hole he dug himself. I was forced out. I kept trying. I thought if I made a big enough pile of truth, someone would have to look. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to make you into a case. You're not a case. You are a... A what? She asked. The breath she took scraped. An exception. A symbol. I can't tell if I'm the woman you love or the file you never closed. The word love hovered between them, terrifying and gorgeous and infuriating. He reached for it and then let his hand fall because he was not allowed to lay claim to anything without a witness. He began, then stopped. He had learned long ago that saying I'm sorry when pain was still raw only made the bleeding worse. I should have told you. I was wrong. I didn't want your father to turn this into a war where truth was a weapon. And I was mad at myself for believing once that he would listen to me because I had numbers. She stared at the folder the way one looks at a map of a country where the roads are beautiful and the villages burned. She tried to marry the man who had threaded a napkin ring to make a knife usable with the engineer who had drafted a complaint and then not said the words she needed most. She could not. I need space, she said. Her voice surprised her with its steadiness. She had thought she would cry. She did not. She was too tired or too practiced. Whatever this becomes, it can't become anything until I can tell if I'm choosing you or choosing my father's enemy. He flinched again like she'd thrown a brick and then nodded because he understood that this, too, was usefulness, the shape you give a wound so it can begin to seal. Eva, he said. He swallowed the word. Take what you need, I'll be here or not. I'll be wherever you need me to be that protects you and Lily both. She wheeled toward the door because her body knew what to do when her mind was static. The bell dinged, foolishly cheerful. She hated it for a full second and then forgave it because how dare she demand awareness from a bell. In her suite, the candle, she had not thrown it away after all, was bent now, warped by heat, still lodged in a small remnant of cake like a stubborn idea. She struck a match because she wanted to see something yield to flame. She lit the candle because she wanted to make a decision that had no collateral damage. The flame rose, small, obstinate. She watched it until her eyes watered. Then she leaned in and blew. The smoke ribboned upward and then vanished as if it could only endure when watched. In the silence that followed, she heard the click of her chair's casters against tile, the sound that had become the metronome of her days. She turned toward the window where